let's get moving. The rest of you can trickle in quietly and not disruptively at all. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Sedlak. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at SCNH. We are proud to be the title sponsor for today's event. We have been an anchor in this region for over 30 years, advising growing and mid-market companies and their leadership teams on strategy, technology, and accounting. We've jumped in with both feet here with the Maryland Tech Council recently because we share a commitment to supporting the region's entrepreneurs, particularly in technology and life sciences. In our conversations with Steve, Kelly, and the MTZ team, we recognize that this partnership for the Digital Transformation Summit was a perfect fit because digital transformation is a core focus at SCNH, both to support our colleagues and our clients. We're building a culture of innovation to solve common business challenges, from talent to processes. We've made some significant strides towards better leveraging data to drive decision-making. And later this afternoon, you'll hear from members of our team who are advising clients on everything from data analytics and automation to outsource technology, leadership, strategy, and implementation to support digital transformation. You don't have to take this leap alone or all at once. It's a journey, and we can all learn from each other. To that end, I'd like to introduce you to Charles Chip Stewart, the former State Chief Information Security Officer, serving under Governor Hogan from 2019 to 2023. Chip. In that role, he ushered the state through a significant transformation by providing the vision and leadership for a mature cybersecurity program. In addition to his technical leadership, he contributed to the state's strategic cyber posture through legislation, executive orders, and emergency directives, helping to make Maryland more secure. Before coming to the state in 2019, Chip spent 15 years supporting the state as a contractor in cybersecurity and technology initiatives and has more than 25 years of career experience as a technologist. That was before we even had technology. Please welcome Chip Stewart.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to SCNH for being the title sponsor, along with all the other sponsors that made today's event possible. I'm excited to be here today, and I just wanted to express my sincere gratitude to Kelly, Maryland Tech Council, for having me here, allowing me the opportunity to share perspectives with you. I apparently have to be close. I'd also like to thank all of you for making the space to be here today. I know everybody has very busy schedules, there's a lot going on, and I really do look at this participation in events like this as an investment that you're making, both in yourself and your organizations. So I really do want to recognize it as such. And lastly, I just wanted to wish Mike Whistler a speedy recovery. I know I was looking forward to hearing him speak today. I'm sure a lot of you were as well. I hope to see him soon. And with that, I just want to welcome you to my presentation, Securing the Future, Navigating Digital Transformation with Confidence. The good news, unlike most tech people, I'm not going to have any slides, so you don't have to bear with that. I'll try to leave time at the end for questions, and I also recognize that I am the barrier between everyone and food, so we'll try to make sure we stay on time. My goal here with the presentation is to split into two main themes. The first is, what are the factors that lead to the outcome, right? Because that's what you're really talking about with digital transformation. So what leads to the outcome of a successful digital or technology transformation project? And then the second piece is how and when should an organization engage with security to reduce the likelihood that a negative outcome occurs as a result of a cyber or other security issue. One of the concepts that really resonates with me is the concept of believability. It comes from a book called Principles by Ray Dalio. In general, it speaks to how to make organizational decisions, but I think there's some applicability here for us today. Namely, hey, why should you actually listen to me? Dalio says, hey, you weight believability on two factors. Does the person have a track record of having done the thing repeatedly and successfully, whatever that thing is? And can they logically explain how the cause-effect relationships leads to the conclusions that they're presenting. So my hope today is that through the presentation and conversation, I can convey that believability, explain the cause-effect relationships that I've seen, and give good weight to the latter. And then for the prior, I'll share a little bit about my background. I'm coming up on 30 years in technology with most of the last 25 supporting transformation projects. I've done a whole bunch of really interesting transformation stuff, working in competitive local exchange carriers, so the telco transformation of the late 90s into the early 2000s, supporting the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, so DARPA, through a bunch of really cool tech projects, many of which are on TV today, right? This is real transformation that happens in a long timeline. And then supporting a number of state and local and other organizational transformations as a consultant. Most recently, I was the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Maryland, leading a number of initiatives to transform cybersecurity for the state, and a handful of successful transformation projects under my belt with that. Being a cybersecurity leader has put me in a very interesting position, especially at the scale of the state. I came into the role in the middle of 2019, and there were two big catalysts I saw for cyber change. I've heard both of them mentioned. Does anybody have any ideas about what those big things were that happened in between 2019 and 2023? Just feel free to shout it out. Yep, COVID. The other one? Ransomware, right? So COVID and ransomware, two things that have driven tremendous digital and technology transformation. Being in the role of the state CISO, I've been a part of, watched, supported, and talked to a lot of organizations that have had to make changes for those two reasons. It's both inside of government, outside of government, other states, commercial organizations. I think in the past 4 years, those have been the two single biggest drivers of digital transformation. For COVID, right, that changed the way that people work and the way that they transact and interact with each other. It created more flexibility for work. It also necessitated changing the way that organizations interact and transact with customers. When the customer can't come to the building, when you can't have get-togethers, that drives some real change. And then the security incidents, ransomware being the most common, has in many cases expedited those transformation projects. A lot of organizations have had to undergo that transformation as part of their recovery. And that's been something that I've seen private sector and government as just a very consistent underlying theme. So just my disclaimer, I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting you let a cyber incident happen to drive your transformation. There's a lot of savings involved. There's a story I'll share later about an organization that wound up having a very expensive ransomware event, save them money on their digital transformation, cut the project timelines down from 3 years to 30 days. Right? I mean, that's a big deal. And when you have something like that, that means that you lose some of the barriers, but it does create other challenges. So I've seen a lot of these initiatives succeed and a lot fail. My brain is very wired to see the patterns. So I'll share a lot about the patterns I've seen today and appreciate that. One of the things that I like to spend time at the beginning of any presentation or briefing doing is doing what I call setting the table. I'm a bit of a word nerd, but it's more than just being a word nerd. It's about creating shared definitions that become the foundation for the rest of our time together, potentially the conversations that you have when you go back to your organizations and share some of the insights that I've shared. Those shared definitions are critically important. I've done, as one may imagine, a lot of briefings about very large and very impactful cybersecurity incidents. For a 30-minute briefing, I would typically spend around 10 minutes of that 30 minutes setting the table. For a 60-minute briefing, 15. So you're talking about 25 to 30% of the time just sharing definitions. People say that's nuts. Why do you do that? I'd often share them in written form after, right? Here's the list of definitions. Why does that matter? There's a great story I have. I'll remove names to protect the somewhat guilty. About a briefing I did. It was very public, where we went over a lot of the definitions around a cyber incident. An individual in question then very publicly pronounced that this was a breach. Breach means something really specific in the context of cyber incidents. Breach means that there's been the unauthorized access to or acquisition of data. It's a very, very clinical definition, but by saying that publicly, as a representative of the organization, what that did was trigger an investigation by the Office of Civil Rights inside of the Department of Health and Human Services for a potential data breach. That's a big deal. That's expensive. It takes resources away from what you need to be doing. And again, this is why I believe that those shared definitions are so important, because without those shared definitions, you'll never get to the shared expectations. So just quick show of hands based on that. I don't expect I'll see many. How many believe that we all have the same definition for what digital transformation or technology transformation means? None. Oh, wow. Okay. Right. And that's, I think, an important place to start for us today. The textbook definition from Wikipedia is to digitize non-digital products, services, or operations. And I read that and I'm like, man, I really dislike that definition because it reminded me of a quote I love by Henry Ford. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. I think that definition leaves so much on the table. It doesn't consider all of the additional benefits. Earlier in a panel, we heard a lot about like data collection, data use, privacy implications. Nothing in that definition recognizes the ability to exploit that additional value as part of that transformation. It also implies an end state. Hey, we're going to do a digital transformation. We've done our digital transformation. There's nothing more to do. I think that also misses a critical component, which is that once you begin digital transformation, that is a continuous thing that occurs for the life cycle of whatever you're doing. So I tried to come up with a better definition that I want to use today as we talk about what is technology and digital transformation. And the way I look at it, I say it's using or improving upon the technology used to deliver products, services, or operations. And I think that gives a lot more latitude to describe transformation projects. It considers the concept that, hey, you have to adjust business process along with the technology transformation if you want this to be successful. There's a story I absolutely love. Again, I'll not share names. I will tell you it was a government agency, and it was more than a decade ago. They went through a transformation project to modernize a form, right? And part of the original process was that the form had to be faxed in. So they've digitized the form. The guy now gets the form via email. The business process didn't change. Changing business process in government is challenging sometimes. So what would any worker that is diligent do at that case? He goes to the floor below and faxes the document to himself at his desk, right? And that's, I think, an important consideration, right? If you are not modernizing your business processes along with your digital transformation, you're missing the boat. So with that, I'll kind of share my expectations for today. What are we going to get out of the conversation? What do I hope that you get? I talked about shared definitions and shared expectations. So number one, I want to make sure that we all leave with a collective shared definition for digital and technology transformation. And feel free to write these down. You can do check mark. You can grade me at the end. Hopefully I get a B or better. I'd like you to leave with insights to affect secure, functional, and lasting digital transformation, and be confident before it starts in the outcome of that transformation initiative. And then lastly, I want to help you improve your chances of leading a successful digital transformation. I pulled some stats. McKinsey lists it. Failure rate of digital transformation, technology transformation projects, 70%. 70% fail. That's better than Forbes, who says 84% fail. I'm a big quotes guy. I mentioned that. There's a Nassim Taleb quote that I absolutely love. It's, "You're guaranteed a repetition. When you hear the declaration, never again." I have to imagine that many of those projects failed more than once. And then, most importantly, I'm sharing all these cool quotes. Hopefully you get to use them, take them away, write them down. So a couple of key takeaways for the presentation today. What makes transformation successful or not? One, vision and goals, right? A shared expectation, top to bottom, bottom to top, for the end state. What is the thing we're doing? Change management. Change is easy if you don't have people. And that is one of the single biggest barriers to a successful digital transformation. And then leadership. It's all about the people. And then the last part, the part that is most in my lane, is the security integration. One of the quickest ways to make a project fail is to exclude security perspective. And I don't just say that as a CISO and as a security guy. We've seen so many projects and initiatives fail because they don't consider both the business and technical vulnerabilities that could impact a digital transformation. So, one of the key points here is the vision and goals. We've talked a lot about the shared definitions, which is important for the presentation, but it's also important for that transformation project. Having your organization have those shared definitions for what the vision of that outcome is going to be. How do you create the shared expectation for the end state? And if that's not clearly defined, it's almost certain that the transformation project will fail. So what's the vision for a project? The vision's it's a business outcome. It's not a technical outcome. As a technologist, I struggle with this. I always want to make it about the technology. But when the tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And it's something you need to be very considerate of, that you're not making every single problem the technology problem. There has to be that realization and recognition that you're trying to solve a business outcome. The analogy I like to use with the difference between the business and technology outcome comes from my very first job out of high school. I was working at part-time doing computer stuff, but I also had to pay the bills, so I took a job at a pizza shop. It was a big box chain, and one of the things I really liked about them is it was the only pizza shop I knew that had computers. So very quickly I stopped making pizzas. I wound up being an assistant manager. And one of the roles you have then is to be responsible for making sure that the computer system's up and running. So you got a big binder that was the disaster recovery procedure. So what happens if the computer fails catastrophically in the middle of a dinner rush? This is the business continuity, right? It's the paper tapes and the calculators and the pencils to make notes and take orders. And that, I think, is the most succinct way to demonstrate the difference between business outcome and technology outcome. If you don't have the business outcome in the end state, you can't be successful. And again, back to updating those business processes to exploit the value that the digital transformation can provide. We talked about data collection and a number of other items related to getting that business value. I think it's really important to recognize that all along the way, there are opportunities to expedite the process, to improve metrics, to really drive that transformation forward. And metrics are a key factor in that. So, I think in short, to sum up the answer to those challenges, one of the most important things, I said top to bottom and bottom to top, everyone in the organization impacted by that change needs to understand why. And that includes customers and other stakeholders. What is the vision for the end state? Why is it beneficial to them that this transformation is occurring? Also making sure it solves the customer problem. I think very frequently, especially as technologists, but also as business owners, there's an opportunity to say, hey, I'm doing this transformation because it's going to do something that benefits me, without recognizing that that may create a negative externality for your customers. Quantifiable goals and metrics, being able to demonstrate how this moved the needle. One of the earlier speakers mentioned a whole bunch of potential metrics you could use, whether it be making money, saving money, positioning the business. You should be able to very clearly demonstrate where that matters, right? Here's how we're going to measure. I'm a big fan of SMART goals, specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. There's a bunch of goal-setting frameworks. Whatever framework you choose, you need to be able to tie the outcomes to that transformation. A great example of this was a technology transformation project for an IT service management system. The folks that were doing the migration from the old system to the new system didn't recognize that the new system changes the way you work and expedites, makes things move more quickly, creates opportunity for robotic process automation and machine learning and AI to get involved to make things better. As a result, they took the old system and made this brand new, shiny, fancy system work exactly like the old system. They removed the capability to do all of the things that the new system was invested in. And the reason for that is they didn't have that vision. They didn't see the same things that the people that were sponsoring the project were pushing for. There's a parable about cutting the ends off of the roast. The daughter says, hey, Mom, why do we cut the ends off the roast? We have to ask Grandma. Grandma says, well, I have to ask my mom. The great-grandmother says, well, when we moved to Brooklyn, the oven was only this big. And I think that that is very common in technology transformation projects as well. You have the opportunity where people may cut the ends off the roast instead of really evaluating, how do we make this work better? The next point I want to cover is about change management, as in terms of how do you make these projects successful. We come back to the shared definition, right? What is change management? If we were to poll everyone in the room, we'd get probably 3 or 4 main themes in the answer there. You have project change, you have process change, and you have people change. For transformation projects, those are the 3 main ones that I see contributing frequently to project success or project failure. If you don't manage all 3 of those well, very frequently what you'll find is that some aspect of the project doesn't go as desired. For people change, what you tend to see is a lot of internal change resistance. There's a great set of terms I came across a few years ago to describe that internal change resistance and change journey inside of organizations. You have the change drivers. Those are the people that are pushing the change forward. They're at the wheel, they're pushing the gas pedal, they're trying to make this thing happen. You have the change passengers. Those are the people that are along for the ride. They're going to contribute whenever they can. They're not going to be trying to steer the bus, they're not going to be trying to push the gas, but they're going to be there in support. And then there are 2 types of resistors. You have your passive resistors. Those are the ones, government is notorious for this, that don't want that change to occur, right? They're going to passively resist, they're not going to participate, they're not going to help. And then you have your active resistors. Those are the folks that are the naysayers, right? Hey, we don't want to do this, here are the problems, here's why we shouldn't make this change. Generally, humans are change averse. The most dangerous ones there are the passive resistors, because those are the ones that really hold up the project and nobody knows why it's not moving forward. Process change. So as you enact digital transformation, technology transformation, before, during, and after, you have to manage all of the process change that occurs. It's important before because you need to start planning and training around that change. During, as you're migrating systems and you're making things different, those processes need to keep up. And that has security implications as well. I'll cover a little bit of that later. But all of this ties back to people change. If you think about upgrading a human resources information system, the onboarding process as you migrate from one system to another changes. And every step along the way, you have new challenges and new considerations to make. And then project change, ensuring good governance, make sure that as the goals change and the needs change, the project is changed and keeps up with that. One of the things I frequently see is the overuse of the term agile project, which in most cases means undisciplined project management. It's a sad fact, right? It's terrible because they say it's agile, we have to redo this. The word you're going to listen for if you want to find an undisciplined agile project is we're rebaselining, right? They're resetting the timelines, the cost, the budget around the project, and you'll see that a lot. And I think that's there's a lot of keywords I pick up on where you start to hear these things and you're like, this is a pattern, right? We're rebaselining, we're agile. Like, no, you don't have a plan. So the solution for this, right? It's simple. It's not easy, right? Back to definition, simple. The solution doesn't take a lot of complexity. It's not easy, right? It requires a lot of work, though. Dedicate resources for the people change. The people change is the hardest change of every project. People, again, are change averse. Bring in professionals, bring in organizations that know how to do that. Because if you're trying to do that on your own, along with managing a technology transformation project, your odds of being in that 80% that fail go up. Ensure that shared definition for why the project's important, the shared vision, the shared expectation around goals and objectives exists and is socialized frequently across the organization. That helps avoid the problem of cutting the ends off the roast. Provide training and support. People are going to be averse to that change. The best way to help get them on board is to make sure that they are engaging along the way in training, understanding the new system, how it works, make sure they're not using it wrong, and then expect the resistance. It's going to still be there, but if you're expecting it, it's a lot easier to deal with than if it comes out of the blue. I tried to come up with a good story for the change management, and it's literally every customer relationship management and enterprise resource planning system that's ever been rolled out. Every one of these projects, this hyperbole, but every one of these projects has the same issue. I think back to a time where we had a project tracking initiative where a new kind of homegrown enterprise resource planning system was being rolled out. It required people to log work in 2 different systems, tracking hours. It cost a lot of time. It was clunky, and as a result, people didn't use it. The single biggest thing I think that could have contributed to that being more used was everybody understanding why. Why is this important? This helps us understand what our resource levels are. Do we have enough people? Do you need help? Is Bill working 100 hours a week? Susan's working 85? John's working 20? These are the things that would have helped people adopt the system more readily. The other big change that I see needing to occur is leadership. This is probably one of the biggest intertwined themes. The leadership kind of hits all through the various projects, but the leadership tends to be one of those themes that without the right leadership at the right times causes projects to fail. That leadership exists at the project level, division level, and organization level, all through. Transformation projects require a different style of leadership than the steady state. There's a list of leadership styles: the democratic, the autocratic, bureaucratic, transactional, laissez-faire, servant, and transformational. All of these styles come with different risk tolerances and personality, and it's not you're A or B. Everybody has a little bit of all these different types of energy. One of the things that I shared with Governor Hogan and team when I came into my role as the state CISO was, I'm not the right person for this job in the long term, right? And they were quite taken aback by that. So listen, I'm here to make the big change, make things happen. Once we hit that steady state where change is more managed and controlled, and we've hit that kind of long-term phase, I'm not the right type of leader anymore. That's when you want to bring in somebody that's more of a servant leader, more of the kind of democratic and bureaucratic type leadership to make sure that things continue to operate the way you would expect. Situationally, the need changes over time, including over the course of a project. You need different energies at different phases of the project to make it successful. When you're deciding how something is going to look, you want a democratic style. If you need to make changes and decisions quickly, autocratic style is required. So that's, I think, something important. Generally, nobody acts in all of the styles at the same time. You're not going to find somebody that has all those capabilities, which means you might need many of these folks in your organization bringing the different energies to the table. So how do we solve these issues? It's back to the people change management. We have to understand the need, we have to understand where the leadership gaps are, and make sure that we're bringing the right people to the table throughout the initiative. Don't be afraid to bring in a team to facilitate the project. Bringing in consultants sounds expensive at first. Consultant rates tend to be significantly more than you would pay an employee. But I think in general it saves money in the long run, because if you look at those projects that occur really quickly and successfully, what you'll find is that they cost less than the ones that were dragged out over a longer period of time. The team that you bring in has to be believable, right? This is, I think, a really important point to make. I pick up on those little keywords you hear. So the believable team says, hey, we do this. This is something we do. Let me tell you about a time where we did this before. The team that's not believable, like, oh, we can do that. Here's how we would approach the problem. Here's how we would consider fixing it. That believability is, I think, a key determinant to whether a project's successful. And then lastly, I said before, expect the leadership needs to change over time. If the leaders can't change, you have to change the leaders. And that sounds really harsh. It sounds really abrupt. But letting an initiative fail, or a transformation project fail, or anything fail because you're concerned about hurting feelings, it's not rational. It's not a good way to operate an organization or a project. It's not to suggest that you can't augment a leader with folks that help bring up those styles. I'm a key example of the type of leader that needs the people around me to help bring up those other energies in projects. So having somebody on the leadership team that provides that bureaucratic energy, somebody that brings the servant leadership, somebody that brings the democratic energy to the project is why I've been successful. And I think that it's just a really important point to make. So another topic I want to cover is what makes transformation successful in terms of security. I try to do a lot of cooking in my free time. I enjoy it. And I've been playing around with pasta sauce lately. And there's the saying easy as pie. The thing I'm trying to bring forward now is it's as difficult as pasta sauce. It doesn't roll off the tongue quite as easily. So with pasta sauce, order and timing of ingredients matter. If you're putting dried herbs in, you need to put them in early so that they have time to bloom and the flavors to develop. If you're putting fresh herbs in, you need to put them at the very end. Otherwise, you get a bitterness to the sauce. That's cool. How's that impact security, right? I think this is where you need to recognize that security is not a single function. It's a bunch of ingredients. And you need to add those ingredients throughout the project at the right times. The transformation project's the pasta sauce. Security gets added at every step along the way for that project. So what makes transformation projects successful or not? If you don't include security at every step along the way, from the initial conversations to the end state, to bringing the system online and bringing it into operations, there's a high likelihood that something bad will happen, and that will cause the project to fail or stumble. Earlier, I think someone introduced the concept of baked in versus bolted on. Security needs to be baked in to that decision making. Trying to bolt it on at the end, you're not going to be successful. It's more expensive to fix after implementation's complete. And then tied to that, in Maryland, there's a bill that is put forth. I don't think it's going to make it through this year. It'll probably make it through next year. That creates an affirmative defense in the event of a cybersecurity incident, provided that you've implemented security properly. So what does that mean? That ties business risk to cyber risk. If you don't make that investment in baking in security to your projects, and something bad happens where there's a loss of personal data, the organization doesn't have that safe harbor that's been created. If fixes require big changes, then you're back to change management. How are you going to implement those changes into your organization a second time around? People get tired of those changes. There's change fatigue. I think if you don't bake those in, it requires a big change. That change fatigue will start to wear on the team. You'll have attrition, you'll have turnover, and again, it reduces the likelihood that the project's successful. Another key point is not differentiating between cybersecurity exploits and business process exploits. So what do I mean there, right? Security is more than vulnerability scanning. There's a incident that happened a few years ago. It was a payment system. If you made a payment into the system, you hit submit payment, somewhere between 48 and 72 hours later, the payment would be withdrawn from your bank account. If you hit refund transaction, right, cancel the transaction, good customer service, comes back into your bank account right away. Wait a second. What if I were to submit a whole bunch of transactions? I have no money in my bank account, and then hit cancel transaction right away. I've now pulled funds from the organization's bank account into my own. I clean that account out, and I make off with, in that case, a little less than $5 million, right? So that is why it is so important to include business risk as part of that journey. And then, no recording for this part, I'm going to say it, don't tell anybody. Another transformation challenge from security is putting too much of a focus on security. Don't tell anybody I said it. There's a fun little quote I heard. It's a Yosemite National Park ranger asked why it's so tough to design a bear-proof garbage bin. He responded, there's a considerable overlap between the intelligence of the smartest bears and that of the average tourist. And I think that that speaks to some usability for systems. I think that if you have a system that has security turned so high up that it impacts that user experience, you're going to have people finding ways to work around the problem, but then it's not actually going to get used. It's a really quick way to have a technology transformation project fail if you've made the system so secure that people can't actually use it. So what are the answers to those challenges? First and foremost, integrate security into the project team and the leadership team from the very beginning. There are two security roles I want to talk about here. The first is the architecture and engineering side. That's an operational function, or if you like the terms governance and management, that's a management function. How do we integrate security into this initiative from an architecture and engineering perspective? The other is a governance function. How do we ensure that we have done all the right things, that we're compliant, that we're doing all of the security things that the project team might make shortcuts on? So I'm a huge proponent of separating the governance and management function. So separate the governance from the delivery team. Depending on the type of digital transformation and system, this might require a privacy officer or a compliance officer if you're dealing with sensitive data, health data, or any sort of other regulation. I'll say this, and I've said it a number of times, having the CISO accountable to the chief technology officer or the chief information officer is a pathway to disaster. The chief technology officer and chief information officer are responsible for pushing the initiatives forward. That's their mission. The security officer should be the brake to say, hey, are we doing things right? Are we cutting corners? If the chief information security officer or the security officer, whatever it is in your organization, is accountable to one of those two people, there's the potential that conflict won't raise to the level where it actually gets addressed properly. Other things to consider, bringing in experts that can identify those business process exploits and ensure they're part of the change management process. Every step along the way, you have an opportunity for a business process exploit to cost your organization money, reputation, project success. There's one recently I had to deal with. Onboarded a new employee. In her first week, she had to take off the second day. It was planned, we scheduled it. She said, I'll just work extra, I'll do comp time. I said, great, just put it in as comp time. Or first day, I get a panicked call from HR the day after she submits her timesheet. What did you guys do? What do you mean? This employee, she got paid a year's worth of salary in her paycheck. We have to roll that back. What did you guys do? So I don't know. It turns out that the business process for entering time, if somebody put in comp time before they had earned it in the next pay period, caused the number to roll over, which caused them to get paid out a whole year. Like, that's insane. These are all real stories, and that I have to think like, yeah, anybody that works for the state, please don't do that. I'm not sure if it's fixed, right? But yeah, just the exact steps, yeah. So and these are the real stories that happen, and this is why that business process integration and business risk decision making has to be part of that process. And then solicit feedback from all the user personas about the negative impacts that those security controls have. Don't necessarily have to get rid of the control. I'm not saying turn off security, but if there's going to be a negative impact, you need to understand what that is, offer training and resources to help people along. I tell the story about my aunt's motor vehicle administration account. She lives in a different state. In her state, you have to change your password for MBA every year. She's not a technologist. She's in her 90s now. She goes to renew her license. She needs to reset her password because it's been 5 years. They have to mail her a document for that. Is she going to wait in the mail for her new password to show up? Or is she just going to go to the MBA? She's going to go to the MBA and do it, which means that digital transformation project has missed at least one potential customer. Given the state that she lives in, I expect it was a lot more, right? So just to recap, the vision and goals, the importance of having the shared expectations for the outcome of the digital transformation is a key indicator of success. Change management, making sure that you're bringing the people and processes along in the transformation journey. Leadership, having the right people at the right times along your transformation project. And then again, consistent integration of security throughout the project. So with that, I'll say I hope my presentation has left you finding me believable. I'd love to hear how I did, so please come tell me. 2 quick book recommendations about technology and digital transformation, the Phoenix Project and the Unicorn Project. A lot of the things you've heard in here are themes that kind of exist in those books as well, right? They tell that same story. It's a fictional story, but it's a real story at the same time because every organization that has gone through these changes has experienced this pain. So hopefully you've left with some insights, some great quotes, and you'll be one of the 16 to 30% that have successful projects. With that, I know I'm the barrier between you and lunch. I'll be leading a roundtable topic on this later, but if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer or share outside of the exact process by which the payroll system fails. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you think about digital transformation, you put the organization more and more dependent on digital. You increase the cybersecurity risk, and in many cases, the organization is still paying catch up with cybersecurity. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, as the cybersecurity leader, how you accelerate the bridge the gap between where they are going and where they are, and where they're going and where they are.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question. So I think the question you're asking is how do you bring an organization along in that journey as it comes to cyber? And it's a hard problem. I think many organizations are still dealing with the challenge that the IT people haven't yet realized that they're also security people. And the receptionist hasn't realized that she's a security person as well, because everyone has these security obligations from the system users, IT teams, everybody in the organization. So, training is obviously part of it, evangelism. I'm a big fan of the concept of like the security champion, which is one person on every team who is the champion for security, right? They're the evangelist in whatever that group is, right? If it's a project team, if it's the HR group, whatever it is, they're the person that becomes the liaison between that team and security. So, when John gets an email in HR saying, hey, can you update my banking information? John goes to Betty and says, hey, Betty, I got this email. This seems weird. What do you think about it, right? It reduces that friction, because the friction's, I think, the thing that really does kill that. It creates more opportunity for things to go sideways with security. And then, I think more and more, the workforce is changing a lot, right? We've seen a lot of folks falling off the back end, not returning to the workforce after COVID. It's resulted in a younger workforce, which means you have a more technologically savvy workforce. But a majority of the workforce is still less technical savvy. And I think that, part of the problem will solve itself over time. But in addition, we need to have that concerted effort, right? The security awareness and training, the seminars, however silly it is, phishing campaigns. I'll share a story about an individual who, he was in a finance department. He fell for phishing emails every single time. The simulated ones, his click rate was fast. I mean, I can't even open and read an email that quickly, and he's already clicked on the link. And he said, man, I'm concerned. I think something bad's going to happen because of me. So we opened up all the training to him, and gave him all this great stuff, all the resources, chat with him from time to time. And he came to my desk one day and he said, hey, that was good. You almost got me. And I said, what do you mean? He's like, that email where you told me to change the banking information, it looked like it came from one of our customers, but I know it was you. That wasn't me, right? So he identified an actual attempt to do wire transfer fraud because he had gone through that training. And he wasn't a tech user, he's a finance guy, but I think you have a lot of those opportunities, and I suspect wherever he is now, he's probably the security champion on his team, right? He's the one that people go to say, hey, how do I handle this problem? I think I saw, good. Yep. Yep. Sure thing. No. I think it's actually a great question for the group. I believe it's Senate Bill 969 this year. What it does is it models, and it's being championed by the Center for Internet Security. They've championed it in a number of other states, Ohio, Connecticut, maybe Arizona. The general gist of it is, when a cyber incident occurs, an organization is the victim, but they're also now open to liability, right? So, hey, our company had a data breach. We got hacked. Somebody stole a bunch of data. How do we respond, right? Do we try and hide it, right? We might do that because we might say, if you look at Uber, which didn't end well for them, they had a data breach that they tried to cover up. You're seeing a lot more of that now. What if we turn the table and say, hey, if you've implemented and can demonstrate that you have reasonable security controls, you've implemented against a known and approved framework, NIST cybersecurity framework, CIS top 18, whatever the ISO 27001, whatever that framework is, you can now say, hey, something bad happened, but we did all of the right things and something bad still happened. That now provides them with the safe harbor in the event of a lawsuit. In states with individual private right of action, what you'll see, I think, is probably one lawsuit just get demolished, and then nobody else is going to be willing to take those cases because the affirmative defense was used successfully. For the states with collective, so where the Attorney General completes the lawsuit, I think you'll see those go away because instead of a lawsuit, it'll be a discovery. It's going to open up a really interesting consulting arena because you're going to have folks on both sides. So the folks that are going to be the experts to say this was appropriate and implemented as designed, and the folks on the other side saying, here's the holes. So it's going to make for some interesting courtroom drama over the next few years. But I think that that is, personal opinion, that is absolutely the direction that we need to head. because it creates that transparency around cyber incidents and doesn't penalize victims of crime. Any other questions? Oh. Yep. So in Maryland, for example, I think the legislature lays out a number of frameworks. I think it was CIS, Critical Security Controls, NIST Cybersecurity Framework, NIST 853, ISO 27001, PCI, and HIPAA, right? Those are the ones they've laid out. This doesn't prevent civil action from those organizations because that's a private right of action around a contractual issue. What it does create is if my data, Chip Stewart's data, winds up on the dark web, I no longer have the ability to initiate a lawsuit. I can initiate, but what their defense will be is like, hey, we're in this safe harbor because we implemented these controls, and even though we did everything right, something bad still happened. We got hit with a 0 day, or some other thing occurred that was not foreseeable. The security we implemented was appropriate, it was right, and something bad still happened. Does that make sense, or? Okay. So around privacy and security, it seems like it's always 5 or 10 years away. In many cases, the feds lead, and then the states build up to close the gaps. I want to say it's going to happen with privacy and security. I don't know. I hope it does because that makes things a lot easier for everyone, but we'll have to see. So in terms of what I'm really talking about there is a ransomware incident occurs, all the systems are down, right? Well, we were planning on doing a cloud migration. Now the organization has to make a business and risk decision. Am I going to try to rebuild the system, on-prem, whatever it was, get everything back online and running, which is going to be hard. It's probably going to take us 30 days to get that done. I have to build servers, I have to do patching, I have to do my validation and all of the things that are required. Or do I take that 30 days and do the cloud migration? We're down already, right? Nobody's going to complain about change windows or anything like that. They can take that opportunity to make that occur. In terms of the timing, is that a reckless decision? I think it is so situationally dependent. There's no right or wrong answer. It comes down to what's the impact of it being successful, what's the impact of it failing, what are the resources available, how complex is it? All of those are factors that need to be considered in that journey. Oop. Well, that's so Simon Sinek. I generally don't like him, but his talk about leading with the why is really important, and that's, I think, it gets back to what are the metrics that we're trying to improve? What's the problem, and how are we going to measure along the way whether this got the outcome we desired? In many organizations, I think government's probably a little bit more lenient than private industry, but having an initiative like that that's expensive fail, you're not going to get a second opportunity. You'll probably get an opportunity at a new organization, but you won't get that second opportunity. So I think, to your point, leading with why we're doing this, what are the outcomes, how are we going to metric that? Like, what's the quantifiable thing we're going to talk about when this is done becomes really important. And then measuring it along the way. Say, hey, here's where we were, here's how we measured. After the project, here's where we are, here's how we measured. Here's the business value. Because The technology is not the thing that's important, it's the business that's important. And I know we're over on, can we do one more? Okay, one more. Yeah. So, and this is I want to go deeper on this in the roundtable, but the question is, how often do the financials impact policy decisions? And the answer is always, right? Every single time it gets in the way, because if you don't have that financial realization about what the impact of a change is going to be, a policy is going to be anything. I'll use the somewhat publicized TikTok ban that we implemented in December. We had to make a lot of decisions in the weeks leading up to that about what is the actual impact. Does the state lose revenue? Do we lose communication ability? What are the things from being able to transact that we lose with that policy decision? All of those things go into play, and the answer, how do you make sure it's successful? You think about it before you bring it up. If the first time you're thinking about what those financial impacts are is when you introduce the thing you want to do, it's going to be one of the first questions, and if you don't have an answer, it's probably going to fail. So with that, we'll do a roundtable later. Anybody that wants to chat, please come find me. And again, thank you, Kelly, Maryland Tech Council, sponsors, and everybody for the time today.